All right, so it is 5 past. Hello, everyone. Good morning for those of us in this part of the world. My name is Aditi Varshne, and I am GAIA's US and Canada Zero Waste Communities Coordinator based in New York City. So welcome to our webinar. This is part of a global series that GAIA is hosting to share our collective experience on the issues that we work on. So these range from consumption to plastic pollution to zero waste and the impacts of waste incineration and environmental justice struggles. So yeah, we hope you enjoy this webinar today. So we're about to learn about the journeys of Ljubljana, Slovenia, and Tacloban City in the Philippines. Both cities are becoming leaders in zero waste implementation. So we have two fantastic speakers today. The first is Jaka Kranch. Jaka is Secretary General at Ecologists Without Borders. He has been a full-time environmentalist since 2009 in one of the most successful Slovenian environmental NGOs, Ecologists Without Borders Association, which is also the national zero waste organization for Slovenia. He works hard on various waste prevention projects, zero waste strategies, and the problem of illegally dumped waste. Realizing that passive action is not enough, the association gathered two massive cleanup projects that both activated about every seventh inhabitant of Slovenia to come clean with them on one single day. That in turn enabled the long-term work on prevention. So thank you, Jaka, for being here today. Our second panelist is Raffaello Villavicencio. Raf is an aspiring changemaker who loves to immerse himself in nature during weekends with his 7-year-old backpack. But during weekdays, he carries on his shoulders the role of one of the program managers in Mother Earth Foundation, an NGO that seeks to transform the Philippines into a more healthy, sustainable, and zero waste country to live in. RAF continues to empower Filipino leaders, fellow youth, and waste workers by providing them with technical support, sharing innovative ideas and his rich experiences, specifically in the central region of the country, on their respective plans and programs. RAF is a graduate of Bachelor of Arts major in sociology in Manila, Philippines, and has a background of social entrepreneurship in Berlin, Germany. And with almost a decade of environmental campaigns, numerous speaking engagements, both at the local and international stage, and community empowerment, Raffaello hopes to create a bigger impact in the Philippines through MEF's Zero Waste program, one city at a time. So thank you for being here, Raf. So real quickly, I'll just explain the structure of today's webinar. It's gonna last 1.5 hours. First, we'll hear all of the presentations, and then after both presentations, we'll have time for Q&A. For the Q&A, I'm going to ask you to use the Q&A section on your screen. We'll be using that tool, not the chat box. So don't put your questions into the chat box, otherwise we won't be able to see them. And just so you know, everybody during this webinar is silenced just to minimize background noise while our speakers are presenting. And I just want to quickly thank Ceci and Gemma for organizing this webinar today. So thank you for all your hard work. So yeah, I think we can go ahead and get started with Jaka's presentation. Are you ready, Jaka?
Yes. Just a second.
That's what.
Can you see my slides? Yes. So
Yeah.
welcome everyone. I'm Jaka from Ecologi Brez Meja, which in English would be Ecologists Without Borders. And if you're thinking Ljubljana, Slovenia, what the hell? Well, think Europe, and then there's this boot-like appendage at the bottom called Italy, and Slovenia is right next to it, a small country, and the capital is Ljubljana. And I come from this organization that has a program called Zero Waste Slovenia, where we tackle partly the Zero Waste Cities program, but also we work with hotels, with restaurants, with event organizers, helping them minimize their waste amounts. And also we have our zero waste lifestyle work under this pillar. So I know you had a webinar already on zero waste, so I'll be brief on recapping a bit of the details, but of course, zero waste has an international definition. What you need to remember is, like GAIA succinctly puts it, no burn, no bury. That is the goal. And usually people get really stuck about the zero in zero waste. You know, they think, oh, this is like absolute zero in the Kelvin scale. You can't reach zero. This is impossible, what we're talking about. So we have to all the time explain, and it was the same with Ljubljana. Zero is the aspirational goal. We will be reaching it asymptotically. So trying to get as close as possible. But, you know, we probably agree that 100% is impossible. But, you know, even the journey itself and getting as close as possible, that's all worthy. That's a viable goal. And we can get a lot done by pursuing it. Now, of course, there also is a narrative of zero waste to landfill that we have to fight off continuously. Some people want to sell it as a zero waste to landfill sort of thing, so they would promote incineration instead. In Slovenia, we're in a sense quite lucky because we don't incinerate much waste, but this is still one narrative that we have to fight. So like I said, zero waste is a journey. We don't care really if you start as the best already or if you are the worst. It's about your commitments, your vision, your strategies as a city that you want to reach. And of course, it has to be also a bottom-up process because you could write all the legislation, all the policies, but if people don't have buy-in into them, if they don't believe it, if they don't live the vision, nothing will really happen. So in a sense, it's also a cultural shift when it comes to our attitudes to stuff. It's not just about changing our consumption patterns and maybe repairing and reusing more or changing the way things are designed, but it's it's more pervasive in a sense. And the tool that we often use when we have questions about waste in Europe, we're really, in a sense, lucky because we have all over Europe legislation that basically implements this waste hierarchy. And what the waste hierarchy tells us is the priority means or let's say means of waste management. So the best waste, of course, is the waste that doesn't exist. So on the top of the hierarchy would be waste prevention, and then only then come recycling and everything else. But of course, in the zero waste movement, we upgrade this hierarchy. We expand the prevention part, and we really don't like incineration or landfilling in general, so they're at the very bottom. And what we really emphasize in the prevention part is the rethinking and the redesign process, because we could have the best municipality with all the infrastructure, with the most educated people and the most environmentally aware people, but if producers still keep producing trash, if they still keep producing items that end up as toxic waste, we haven't solved anything. So we have to have this element of rethinking and redesigning things around us. Now, in Slovenia, like it was mentioned, we are also the national coordinator for Zero Waste Cities program inside Zero Waste Europe, which is part of, which is basically GAIA Europe. And we have a network of such municipalities. And they join for various reasons. Sometimes it's the waste manager that is the most interested one. Sometimes it's the municipality itself. And they all have really concrete goals that they want to reach on this path. We don't allow them to call themselves zero waste cities because they're just on the journey to zero waste. They're not there yet, of course. And Ljubljana was one of them. And it all started, what does this mean first? This is not something that they can just say, oh yeah, we're a zero waste city or we're on the path to zero waste. This is a pretty structured process. They have to file a formal application. They have to write a commitment that is accepted by the whole city council. And the commitment already says, yeah, okay, we want to reach these measurable smart goals, and we'll do it with this strategy. So they, of course, have to prepare the strategy itself, which is partly looking to the future, but also has a good assessment of the current situation when it comes to waste and waste management. and they have to also create a zero waste board or council, which meets at least once per year to basically look at what's been going on, what the progress is, were there any problems, and are any new ideas that need to be implemented or stop being implemented, stuff like that. And of course, it's a public process, so it has to be also presented to the public, open for comments, and of course, in the end, us in the West Europe have the final overseers overseeing function of the final seal of approval, if it's okay, if it's not, and then they get in. And Ljubljana got in September of 2014, and it was the first capital in Europe that did so. It was one of our first cities in Slovenia. And interestingly, you know, three different cities, three different municipalities decided, okay, we want to be first. They were first to announce it, and Ljubljana heard about it, and they were, in a sense, jealous, I guess, because it's also about prestige. So they strong-armed us a bit, and basically, this is a picture from the, let's say, opening event where all four municipalities are present, and Ljubljana basically is now also one of the first. And they had good reasons for joining, because not only, you know, it's a matter of prestige, but they are very good at waste management. If you look at this graph, it shows separate collection rates for the main fractions like paper, packaging, glass, and bio-waste. In 10 years, they almost tenfold increased the amount of separately collected waste. And they really had a good understanding of where the sector is going. At the European level, we were expecting higher targets. We were slowly moving towards the first circular economy package proposals. And also in Slovenia, the situation was pretty clear. We had plenty of landfills, but many will have had to be closed because of the landfill directive and higher standards. Also, we have very limited incineration capacity. So basically, if you don't want to pay really, really high amounts of money for landfilling, you just have to manage your waste and minimize it as much as possible. And Ghana really got this. And furthermore, it also helped with their application to be the Green Capital of Europe in 2016. So this process takes, you know, 1 year, and then it's for 1 year ahead. So in 2014, they had an application for 2016, and they won it. They were the Green Capital of Europe. And part of the reason that they won it was their good waste management. So this commitment to zero waste really helped them on this path.
Jacob, 1 second. We got a request for you to speak up a little bit. So yeah, would you mind speaking a little louder? Thanks.
I'll move the microphone louder, closer. Okay, so they won it, and it really helped with promotion of the concept elsewhere also, and they got many visitors. So you're maybe thinking, okay, but what's in their actual strategy? Well, strategy is like any other strategy, full of blah blah, but also concrete stuff like targets. And if you look at the blah blah parts, it's more about slowly moving from just waste management to resource management. Because like I said, the top of the waste hierarchy, you're dealing still with items before they even become waste. So it's I guess, a more thorough approach. And of course, various things about production, optimization of waste management, all these little details that the operator knows best. And if you look at the proposal, basically it said, oh, this won't have any effect on the budget. But just a clarification, the waste manager is also a public body owned by the municipality. So they had a goal to be cost effective, a goal to be, well, even positively cost effective, because they wanted to leave the cost for the end consumers, users, the same. And we have plenty of reasons why it makes economic sense to go zero waste, not just environmental, but this is not the time for that. So let's look at the targets. They set their strategy for 20 years, so roughly 10-year and 20-year targets. and they have plenty of targets and sub-targets, but the targets that we insist on always is these three. So the separate collection rate, the amount of residual, so the waste that is not separately collected, and the total waste, or at least municipal waste amounts, all measured per person. So this is something we track throughout the years, and I'll present it at the end. Now, the key zero waste measures that they made, this is a good list for you to screenshot or to write down, because it's always the same process basically. But in Slovenia, we are lucky that we already have mandatory bio-waste separation and collection. We already have a sort of mandatory week pay as you throw implemented. So Ljubljana had a bit less work in a sense to become one of the best practices. So we have in Ljubljana door-to-door collection, of course, also bio-waste. They really worked hard to reduce the amount of rounds, so they collect waste less regularly, forcing people to separate more. They implemented various prevention measures, which I'll mention later. And this is where there's a bit of a disparity or a bit more work to be done, because this is where the municipality itself has more power. Now, the waste manager, because they're the experts, so the municipality says, okay, you're the waste manager, you do everything, but the waste manager doesn't have the authority, for example, to implement reusable nappies in kindergartens or something like that. And so one of the things that really helped them on the path was the regional center. It's also located in Ljubljana for waste management was finished. And they really got proper composting going on and capturing the gases and all that. But one of the useful tools that I'll mention in just a sec is composition analysis, because it also allows you to snapshot your progress. But one thing that Ljubljana is really good at is communication. They're excellent at it, and it's an often overlooked part of good performance. So what's this composition analysis thing? So basically you take a black bin or this bin of unseparated waste, and you analyze it to see what people are throwing away and not separating. And you can see these are results from 2 years ago for Ljubljana, that basically there's still a lot of paper in the mixed bin. There's still some plastic packaging in the mixed bin. This could all be separately collected. There's 10% of diapers inside it. Well, we can't decrease by separate collection, but we can start thinking of, maybe giving reusable nappies to families with newborn kids and stuff like that. So this is a really good progress meter in a sense, gives you really detailed ideas where next you could focus on. When it comes to prevention, they're doing interesting stuff. I particularly like their work on invasive plants, because that's a pretty hard problem in Slovenia. And they're basically giving them a second life, because usually you would just destroy them. Some aren't even appropriate for composting because you could just spread them further. But they're making paper and other products out of them. And of course, they do the usual of promoting common composting, promoting gardening, promoting drinking water from the tap, and we have several water fountains in the city. We don't have any sexy examples of redesign, like maybe you're familiar with the coffee capsules from Italy. They do quite some work on really promoting reuse and second-hand shopping. And there's also a week repair cafe going on. They amended a bit of the legislation for public events, but they're forcing them to use reusable cups and stuff like that, avoiding some of the single-use plastic. And of course, they really like to work on food waste, because food waste is one of the most understandable fractions and something people care about. So it's a really good way to get them to think about other ways too. So one thing they set up was a reuse center where people can bring the stuff that they don't need, but it's still usable, and not throw it away. And then they resell it for a low price. And this, we have only one, even though they have plans for more. It's not even in a central location. And by now it sells over 100 items per day. It's so successful. So really, really super duper thing. Because a lot of this zero waste on the municipality level is not just about, oh, let's build this infrastructure or let's communicate it well. It's about enabling your population to live a less wasteful life. And things like this really help. And this is one automatic machine that we have, I think 3 or 4 now in the city, where you can come with your own packaging and buy detergents, buy hygiene products, oils, even some juices. And of course, if you don't have your own container yet, there's always some leftover plastic bottles nearby. Now, this is a graph showing an example of one of the events. This is for basically the celebrations of New Year's Eve. And throughout the years, they managed to almost half the half the waste generated. So they're trying on various little things. And one of the important things that they're doing is they realize that they have to lead by example. They have to be as efficient as possible themselves. So, for example, the waste management center is equipped with second-hand furniture. They really pester the rest of the units of the municipality to use that. They use recycled toilet paper from Tetra Packs and various little details that just nicely add up. Now, as far as communication, they're really excellent at it. You know, proper professional campaigns, wide-reaching, multimedia, video, music, sound. This is the magazine that they put out once yearly, usually, and it's almost like a little National Geographic. It's not preaching, it's not boring. You know, it's a broader approach, and it really works. This is one example of a campaign for promoting basically reuse with some old singers, famous stuff in Ljubljana, but I'm sure nobody knows what I'm talking about. This is another one where they had basically the trash bins around the city campaigning against food waste. So the black bins had these billboards nearby or other displays where they were saying, if we're on the streets, it doesn't mean we're hungry. So, you know, emulating the homeless, something like that, basically saying bio-waste belongs to the bio-waste bin, not to us. Of course, sometimes they missed their mark. They had old people rapping, which looked really awkward, I don't know. But in general, they understand that if you have all the infrastructure, it doesn't help you at all if people don't use it or don't want to use it or don't know how to use it. So communication is key. Okay, so lastly, results. So this is a graph with everything. So let me explain. The red stuff is the residual amount. So in kilograms per person per year, you can see that it wobbles a little, slowly decreasing, and the goal is the dotted line. So the green line and the dotted line is the goal for the separate collection rate. And you see that it's quite healthily and steadily increasing. Of course, they still have ways to go because 78% of the goal is for 2035. And it's a big challenge, especially because the amount of tourists is increasing rapidly. This is the golden line. And the most problematic of the goals is the, well, not pink, violet, I guess, bars that represent the total municipal waste kilograms per person. And this is increasing. Ljubljana is, and all these early municipalities are not lucky in this sense because all of them set their goals in the middle of the economic recession. So the values were already low. And of course, when you set targets, you lower them further. But in fact, the economy picked up. And if we look at, for example, the countrywide data for generation and economic growth after the crisis, there's like 95% correlation between the two. So as we get more affluent, we waste more. And this shows here. It's not so visible from the graph, but the growth is slower in our cities that have zero waste strategies. So they are doing some reduction, but the overall trend is against them. And this will be, and well, this is still the main challenge, how to really achieve permanent reduction. Because at one point, if you want a sustainable world, we have to split economic growth from waste generation in general. So yeah, that's about it. I'm sure I forgot something, but we'll have Q&A later. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Jaka. And remember, we will be taking questions for both presentations at the very end. So up next, we have Raf. You ready to go, Raf?
Hello? Yeah.
Awesome.
So, hello everyone. So, I'll be sharing about the journey of Tacloban. So, sharing. Okay. So, yeah. Most of you know Tacloban. Uh, like in 2013, it was hit by a tropical super typhoon Haiyan, which led to a massive destruction of the city. And Tacloban City is located at the eastern Visayas region. As you can see on the screen, it's in the middle eastern part of the Philippines. And Tacloban City is the first class highly urbanized city in the Philippines. So its night population is around 258,000, but during daylight, it almost reached a million uh, number of people. So this is what happened in Tacloban in 2013. So you can imagine a lot of debris, a lot of waste, and of course the casualties were there. It was a bad, really bad or worse situation to be in that area. And of course, after this incident, there are a lot of pollution or a lot of waste that the city needs to address, starting with their waste management problems, because a lot of debris arises from those from the typhoon, from the airports, from the buildings, from the trees. They needed to transport it somewhere. So eventually they had this waste crisis after that super typhoon incident. And aside from the waste management, they also had some water pollution, and the dumping of mixed waste has started, and some people, locals, are uh, started to go into burning of waste. And, and as a result, this is a challenge for the Tacloban city after that incident, is to address this waste problem. And in 2017-18, the Tacloban City started to receive some notice of violation from the national agency, from the Department of Environment, that they needed to address their waste management problems, specifically their open dump site, which is inside their city. So the city decided to uh, look for solutions, and there are also waste to energy proposals. There are also hauling and collection problems. So they decided to look for alternatives, better solutions, and that's where they uh, found out about Mother Foundation. So in October 2016, the mayor of Tacloban City has decided to partner with Mother Foundation. So Mother Foundation partnered with the Tacloban City to help them support on their waste management problems. So we've started contacting the city, mayor's office, and then when the mayor decided that, okay, we wanted you guys to help us, so we will be endorsing you to our City Environment and Natural Resources Office, which is the CENRO. So if you're going to look at the lower bottom left picture, that's their City Environment Natural Resources team, because this is the local department which focuses on the environmental programs of the city. And it's crucial that we get the support of the city mayor and the endorsement of the mayor down to the local agencies and to its local officials. And speaking of local officials, we're going to look at the bottom right picture, we've invited and met with the barangay officials. So barangays are basically the smallest local government unit in the Philippines. So we call it a barangay. It's like a small village, a small community. And with those small village, they have their own local officials and local government unit. So we've interviewed the barangay officials. We've asked, we've do a profiling. What are their initial activities before? What are their future plans? So this is to assess their existing waste management program, and also to get their point of view and what went wrong or what went great for their programs before Mother Earth comes in. So after the endorsement, usually Mother Earth Foundation implements a community-based solid waste management program based on the 10 steps of on how to establish a community-based solid waste management program. So first, we'll start with the multi-sectoral training and consultation. This is after the consultation with the local officials. And this time, it's more on the different stakeholders in the community, including the households, the business sector, the schools, the church, the religious groups, and other sectors who are involved in waste generation or waste recycling, etc., etc. So we wanted to get their insights, their perceptions, so we can have a better understanding of the waste culture in the community. So this is the first step after the coordination and formalization of partnership with the city office. So go, we went down to the next level, to the multi-sectoral and other stakeholders. So after consulting the multi-sectoral, we've gathered the data and presented it to the Barangay Solid Waste Management Committee. So basically, the committee consists of the local representatives from the local officials, the business sector, the schools, the recyclers, and other stakeholders who wants to be involved in the decision making or planning or in the implementation of waste management in their community. So that's the role of the Barangay Solid Waste Management Committee. And the good thing about this, it is required under our national law, which is the Republic Act 9003 or the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of 2000. And this committee helps the barangay to oversee the implementation of waste management program in their respective communities. And the next step after establishing or reactivating the committee, we'll proceed now to the formulation of their community ordinances, 10-year solid waste plan, or 1-year plan. So all of the data gathered during the consultation, the training, and then the profiling of the barangays, we presented it here on step 3. So this is for the local officials, for the committee to decide, to assess which is the best or appropriate solution for their waste management problems. And then after approving the committee or the ordinance and the plan, we'll proceed now to the formulation of systems and the collection schedules. So the crucial part of this waste management planning and formulation of system is we, we carefully assess the waste generation and classification of waste among the different communities, barangays, and cities. So we conduct, if you've heard about the WABA or waste assessment and brand audit, it's a study to analyze the different waste generated in a specific community and the classification of waste from the different sources. So WABA uh, helps the community determine which is the most appropriate solid waste management system for that specific community or barangay. And it gives them a glimpse of, okay, how big our MRF, materials recovery facility, should be, and composting facilities, and how frequent is the collection schedules should be in our community. Let's say in Tacloban City, approximately they are generating 0.37 kilograms per capita per day. So this kind of figures gives uh, the local officials an idea on how often their collection should be in their community. So after having a system and a collection of schedule, they will also be presenting the ordinance, the drafted ordinance. This is already consulted to the community. So in the case of Tacloban, they already have a city solid waste ordinance on ecological solid waste management program, which requires all the barangays to strictly implement proper waste management program at the source. Actually, it's the adopted version of the national law of the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act in the Philippines. And right now, the good thing about Tacloban is they didn't stop for the solid waste management law in their city. They're now into proposing a plastic bag and prohibiting the use of polystyrene for food products in their markets, in their business establishments. So the city councilor, the city enro, and the mayor is supportive on this initiative. So I think sooner or later this year, the plastic bag ban will be approved. So the next step after gathering enough data and formulating the right system, it's about time to establish or what do you call this? Um, renovate their respective materials recovery facilities. So with in Moderate Foundation, for us, MRF is the heart and soul of ecological solid waste management program because MRF helps the barangays, the smaller villages, to facilitate and divert their own waste generation. So this helps the city saves money from the hauling, from the processing of waste, etc., etc. As you can see on the left, upper left picture, this is a picture of an ideal MRF. So for us to be for it to be called an MRF, it should have an eco shed for the recyclables, the number one, of course, with its own labels, perimeter fence for security, and then a collection cart. We prefer this innovative collection vehicle, of course, less carbon emission and less repair, less traffic. And the cities, the houses in the Philippines are a little close to each other, so this is more appropriate rather than using a truck. And of course, we have composting pit and heap, the above ground and underground composting, because after collecting the biodegradables, the barangay can process their waste, their biodegradable waste or organic waste on that facility. And after producing uh, organic compost, they can use it on their organic garden. And then lastly, the number 8 is for the residuals, temporary containment for residuals. And this is the only place where the city truck can collect the waste because the, the system has already been decentralized. So the barangay already manage the waste, like the biodegradable and recyclable. And the only waste that the city will collect is the residual waste. And for Tacloban, the waste assessment for Tacloban is around 63% biodegradable and recyclable waste out of their 100%, and 27% are residuals and hazardous waste. Meaning to say, if the city, if the barangays will strictly implement proper waste segregation, the minimum that they can achieve, at least for waste diversion, is 63%. And as you can see on the right picture, there's sample plan of the MRF. And as of now, there are 79 MRF and eco sheds in Tacloban City. As you can see, it doesn't require to be a concrete as long as it serves its purpose and The available resources are there, and yeah, it's operational. That's the most important thing. It's operational because there are a lot of other communities who have a beautiful MRF, but it's not being used. So as long as it is operational and it serves the purpose of the waste generated by the community, it's all good. And as a result, the barangay materials recovery facility helped the city close and rehabilitated its dump site. And right now, they have opened a sanitary landfill, and step by slowly they're regulating the barangays not to throw mixed waste in the landfill. And actually, they're not accepting mixed waste from the barangays right now because they need to follow the program, the proper waste segregation at source, and only residuals will be accepted in this facility. And number six, before formally opening the MRF, we partner in partnership with the city again. We've conducted a house-to-house information education campaign, and with this, the difference between this IEC is we go door to door with the different households in Tacloban City. And for the record, I think we've talked to 36,000 plus households in the whole city, covering majority of the barangays. And the positive impact of it is, of course, they feel that it's important because we've explained it personally, and we provided a material that can serve as their guide that they can follow during their uh, waste segregation before disposing it to the waste collectors. And now that the MRF is ready, the awareness is there. Uh, this is the time where we conduct the dry run collection. As you can see in the photos, uh, with our barangay collectors, we go house to house collection, but instead of issuing a ticket, we check first the different uh, bins and their waste that they dispose. And if it's segregated, we'll try to recognize their efforts. But if it's not, we'll give them a warning and do the actual uh, demo of the waste segregation. Because for us, the IEC alone is not enough. You need to continuously remind them about the proper waste segregation. And actually, the IEC earlier is more of the theoretical part, and this is the application part where the households or the residents are actual practicing the waste segregation. And after a week or a month, if the households are already used to the segregation system, the barangays and the city will now decide to go full implementation, meaning to say, if it's not segregated, the collectors will not collect it. And from the 30% coverage of collection before the intervention of Mother Earth, it's now 100%. It's a full coverage of the city with a collection system. So that's one of the benefits of having a zero waste program. Instead of the trucks, it becomes more decentralized. It gives a better chance for the communities to participate and to do waste segregation. So from the collection, from recording, as you can see in the pictures, they're recording households who are doing it and who are not yet doing it. And after the collection, they'll bring it to the materials recovery facilities of their barangays, and then sort the recyclables for the biodegradables, process it through their respective composting facilities, and then eventually use it for their gardening. And for step 9, to sustain the program, there's a monitoring system where they check the bins, the containers of the households, and make sure to give them enough IEC until such time they manage to comply with the system. And if not, there will be enforcement of the ordinance where the households will be fined or penalized. We have first, second, and third offense. Like for the first offense, it's usually around $6, and then $10 for second offense, and then $60 for third offense. So that's the enforcement for the waste management system. And we also provide trainings and orientations for the environmental police. So the people on the bottom right picture helps us monitor and enforce the ordinance for those who are people who are not uh, properly implementing waste segregation. And this is the overview of the Mother Foundation 10 steps on establishing a community solid waste management program. So again, it's important to uh, start, gather your baseline data, come up with your localized waste assessment and brand audit, touch base with the people, get their insights, their perceptions, and then slowly implement the program. Do a dry run before doing a citywide or a full implementation program. And of course, to sustain it, you have to have a good monitoring and reporting system to collect and to record the waste diversion efforts, and of course the enforcement to sustain the program. And this is my uh, last uh, some of my last slides. So before, the compliance rate of Tacloban is at 10%. January 2019, it's now at 63% among the 63 barangays who are implementing the waste management program. So it's still an ongoing progress, but at least compared to the 10%, it's now 63%. And before, the Tacloban city's waste generation per day is at 175 tons per day. Now it's 104 tons per day. And the diversion rate is now much higher. So it's around 50+%. So that's the impact of our Zero Waste Cities program, specifically here in Tacloban. And from dump site, you can see from dump site, now it's sanitary landfill for central collection. Now it's a decentralized collection. And also one of the highlights of this is that before they have 10 local recyclers or junk shops, as we call it. Now they already have a 20 to 22 registered local recyclers. So the increase on the interest of waste segregation is really high. And before I end this, I would like to recognize, of course, our team, our hardworking and committed team, who's doing an amazing job to support and empower our communities. And the good thing about it is all of them are from Tacloban, so they're locals from Tacloban. So yeah, that's our story from Tacloban, and that's our journey towards a zero waste city.
Great, thank you so much for sharing that very inspiring story from Tacloban. So I'm sure our participants have questions for both of our presenters. So now is the time to type any questions you may have into the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many as we can before our end time in about 30 minutes. Okay, someone has a question for Raf. So Enzo says that can people go directly to MRFs to bring organics or recyclables, like when they pick finished compost? So yeah, do people go directly to the MRFs, or is there some kind of middleman involved?
It depends on the barangay. Some barangays preferred not to let the people throw their or put their waste directly to the MRF for maintenance uh, concerns. But some barangays, especially if they're more familiar with the community and if they felt that the compliance rate is high, and it also depends on their locations, they allow these residents to directly uh, dispose their MRF to the MRF. But then again, we always advise the barangays that there should be a caretaker, the MRF caretaker, to supervise it. Yeah.
Great. Okay, just a reminder to please put your questions into the Q&A and not the chat. I see some people putting them in the chat, but it's easier for us to just have them all in one place. Okay, so David is asking, how many staff do you have for one barangay to implement the 10 steps?
So again, for at least for Moderate Foundation, we have at least one moderate staff to monitor the community. But if the community is quite big, we seek the support of the barangay to help us do the monitoring and then supervise the operation. Because then again, we need to remind ourselves that this is the program of the barangay, not ours. So we need to involve them step by step along the process because they need to have a sense of ownership of the program. And we want to avoid like the typical programs like after the NGOs are uh, gone, finish contract with the community, the program also stops. So we wanted to avoid that. So as much as possible, involve the barangay, but at least one Mother Earth staff per community, and with the representative from the barangay.
Great, thank you. Jacqueline has two related questions for both speakers. So number one, how much did it cost to implement the system in both cities? And number two, is it possible to compare this cost in relation to the traditional system? And which one is more costly?
Well, in Ljubljana's case, like I said, this was not really an additional cost. You know, the municipality and the waste operators did it as part of their regular duties. So it wasn't like a big costly project for them. And in comparison, it's the cost of waste management in Ljubljana for the end user is lower than in most cities in Slovenia, for example. We have other examples from close by where job creation is higher because, you know, the amount of people you need if you want to play reuse or prevention is much higher than if you just landfill or burn. So economic reasons are on our side.
And Ralph, do you have an answer about this question of costs?
Oh yeah. For Tacloban, it costs around 50,000 US dollars, but it's already good for 2 years. And it gives enough time for the city to allocate funds and as well as the barangays to kickstart their own programs because most of the barangays, especially the rural barangays, doesn't have enough funding to set up their MRF, their collection system, the allowance of the collectors. So they needed enough time to allocate budget and get outside support as well, like funders or um, international funds to help them with the implementation.
Okay, great. So next question is about Ljubljana specifically. So Peter, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, from the EEB, is saying that Ljubljana is often quoted by them as a good example, but two issues remain somewhat unexplained. So sending RDF to incinerator in Vienna. So is this something that we can expect to be a transitional period only? And his follow-up question was, and Ljubljana reports separate collection rates, but not recycling rates. Can we expect those numbers to be similar?
Well, in Slovenia in general, we don't report recycling rates because the system is more complicated than that. It's not up to the municipality to recycle the waste, but we have extended producer responsibility schemes that the waste manager basically gives away, for example, all the packaging waste to, and then they have to deal with it. So they don't have direct information. Now, of course, a lot of the waste streams are not problematic, but packaging is one where we have like a culmination of the crisis this year, basically, and we're just waiting for the reform to finish. So for the packaging reported stuff, I would say that there is quite a gap. For example, plastic packaging, some estimate that only around a third of it is actually recycled in the end. And we're really looking forward for the changed reporting provisions that we got from the union, which means that things will become comparable between cities, between towns, between countries again, but we have to wait for that. Ljubljana as a city can't do that much about it. They can estimate, for example, recycling rates, which I'm sure they do now and then, but it's not really their problem that much. As far as RDF, of course, you have to do something with residuals that too calorifically intensive to be landfill because we have a ban on that. And yeah, they found a way to ship it to Vienna that was cheaper. And of course, in their commitment, they agree that they should be decreasing the amounts, that they should also be decreasing the amount that they landfill and increasing the amounts that they extract from residuals. But this is an ongoing process because infrastructure has to be built and other options become available. So I don't think there's any quick fix here.
All right. And another question for Jaka. How is Ljubljana enforcing separate collection for citizens? And this is from Darko.
Enforcing, well, they do have some control. So separate collection is mandatory either way, but how do they enforce it? Well, we don't have really household level trackability of waste. So for example, if there's a multi-story building, everyone puts the waste in the same bins. So that's a pain point in a sense. We don't have RFID chips and stuff like that yet. But of course, the people that do the collection of waste, they see when waste is not collected properly, when it's misplaced or mixed very much, and they can basically bill the owners of the bins because bins are assigned to the houses basically or the buildings, and they know who is generally responsible. It's just the problem that with multi-story or multi-apartment building, the responsibility is shared, so it's not as effective. You have fines there. But yeah, of course there are fines. There are, just not vocal, just warnings and stuff like that. There are mechanisms, but people in general are quite keen on separate collection anyway. So it's a normal curve. So of course you have always a few percent try to ruin everything, but that's unavoidable. Okay. I don't think any special enforcement is being done compared to anywhere else.
Okay, and there's one question from Shiba about Tacloban. So they'd like you to please share more info on the sanitary waste facility that was built. Was there anything special done to ease the disposal? Does it have speedy decomposing, or is it just sort of another landfill?
The sanitary landfill for Tacloban has a lining for the leachate, and then it also has its own materials recovery facility. But com- organic waste should not reach the sanitary landfill because there are already numerous barangay materials recovery facility in the different communities. But for the sanitary landfill, uh, it has a sanitary liner, and a gas vent, and they also have a composting facility there to avoid putting mixed waste in the sanitary landfill. And this is the this is the goal of the sanitary landfill, to prolong its lifespan from 10 to 20 years. Because if the barangays or the communities will continue to throw mixed waste, it will just be around 3 to 5 years of usage. So the goal is to prolong the lifespan of the landfill until such time that the barangays were able to address their residual waste, or redesign their residual waste, so that landfill will not another landfill will not be built again.
I was on mute. Another question for you, Rafa, from Reggie was how many tons of waste are being diverted to the landfill of Tacloban? And I guess that question can be taken in two ways, especially given this last thing that you answered. So I think I'll ask how many tons of waste are being diverted from landfill because of these barangay MRFs? And two, how many tons of residuals are being sent to this new more sustainable and healthful landfill?
So for the landfill, for the diversion, it's around 60 to 70. Sorry, it's around 60 to 70 tons of waste being diverted at present. And for the residual waste, it's around 20 to 30% of the remaining tonnage goes into the landfill. But then again, there are efforts in the barangays to reduce the residuals going into the landfill. Like some barangays are initiating to do their own plastic barangay ordinance at their own level, and some barangays are doing upcycling of this uh, residual waste just to prolong its life. But others are already exerting extra initiatives to reduce the waste consumption in their community. So yeah, that's the figures so far. Because the data, they will be updating again the data, I think anytime within this year. So I'll keep in touch with the Tacloban team to get some updates. But we'll be happy to share the updates with the participants.
Great. So Jacqueline has another question related to the informal recycling sector. Were there informal recycling sectors in these cities when the systems were implemented? Were they included in the new systems, and how?
Should I go first?
Go for
Okay.
it.
For the informal recycling sector, they are our top priorities, especially when the communities or the barangays started to implement their waste segregation. First and foremost, we don't want to lose their jobs because of this program. We want to uplift their jobs. So instead of like ignoring their presence in the community. So what we do is we talk to the informal waste pickers, and then we consult them if they want to be part of the waste collection program, the zero waste program, and most of them agreed, and they eventually become the barangay collectors. So they are now authorized collectors. They collect segregated waste, and they earn additional incentives, not just from the recyclables, but they also have allowances from the barangays. And compared to their usual work before, they are collecting most of the time they're collecting mixed waste and just saving the recyclables. But right now they have a proper training with proper gears to protect them and also provide them health benefits. So yeah, that's the case for Tacloban.
In case the question was also for me, there wasn't or there isn't really an informal recycling sector in Ljubljana. Of course, there are a few individuals collecting paper waste outside of the system because they were able to sell it as physical persons still. But that's again not even a minority. That's literally a handful only. So not something to keep in mind.
Okay, and David wants to know what your strategies are to scale up the program in each of your cities.
Well, the program. So the strategy itself and what they do with it is up to the city itself. Now, of course, we meet with the, let's say, supervisory board once per year, and we adapt and comment and see where we are. Potentially also changing the strategy itself, of course. But they, in Ljubljana in general, they have various thoughts and streams where they think they should continue, because also we have some European obligations that are coming up, and why not do it sooner than later? They'd really like to have more this sort of reuse second-hand shop centers. They were thinking of having a, a wholesome experience, in a sense, to build a sort of a mall where you'd have all these repair shops, where you'd have packaging free shops, where you'd have a reuse center, where you'd come to hang out, to learn, to and basically appreciate stuff, I guess. Uh, we'll see what happens, because also the leadership's changed recently, and they've been a bit quiet. But that's Ljubljana. As far as our program for the whole city network goes, well, we let them come to us because they have to believe in it first. But yeah, we have to restructure the way we work, in a sense, to be more effective, because we are there as a service to help them think, to help them find the resources, to help them find partners in other countries, expertise, and all that. But I'm sure that there are ways that we could accelerate them on their paths to be more ambitious, let's say, because many see it, okay, it's a path, it is a journey, so sure, we're already pretty good, it doesn't matter if we take it a bit slower, a bit easier. But eventually, especially if you're already a good performer, you will hit the sort of a glass ceiling, and you'll have to do a more of a quantum leap, like changing between one orbital to another. There's no in between. So yeah, our strategy in our organization is basically get enough funding to be able to get more focus to this work. Basically, it's as simple as that.
Yeah. For Tacloban, before implementing a citywide program, we clustered the different barangays. So basically, they have 138 barangays. So we clustered the 138 into 4 clusters. So there's a southern cluster, northern cluster, up upland cluster, because some of the villages are up in the mountains, and there's a downtown cluster, which is the center of the city. So after implementing the program and completing the different clusters, what we do is we invite other cities, city officials to visit Tacloban City, for example, to do a eco tour, to do an eco tour. So they'll visit the model sites, they'll be involved in the collection, they'll be exposed to the operation of MRF, and this helps the other cities or other officials to be convinced, and we can easily help them present it back to their community that hey, this program works in Tacloban and your local officials witness it, and I think we can also do it here in your community to do the zero waste program. So basically, we do it step by step, cluster by cluster, until such time the program is ready for the full blast or the full implementation.
Okay, and Alejandra wants to know, were there any cultural barriers to the zero waste programs in both your cities, and how did you overcome them?
Well, nobody knows Slovenia exists, so mostly Slovenians live there. So we're pretty culturally uh, non-diverse in that sense. But no, jokes aside, well, I think two things come to mind, but they're probably applicable in many more places. So, for example, second-hand clothing. Many people had a sort of a taboo about using it. You know, you would share maybe within family or within friends, but with strangers, that's odd. And then there are some taboos related to food reuse. And how we solve it, how Ljubljana solves it, is just, again, communication, communication, communication.
Yeah. In our case, usually we have a lower income, middle income, and upper class exists in a typical society here in the Philippines. But the struggle with the collection, especially for the upper upper class, is they tend to doubt the program because of security issues or security concerns. And the good thing about the Zero Waste program, Mother Earth Zero Waste program, is that we connect to the people even before the actual collection starts. So the cultural barrier between those classes were already addressed through endorsing them properly to the community, meaning to say to all sectors, to all stakeholders, to all classes, that these are our official waste collectors in our community. So they'll be collecting your waste on a specific schedule. And we also have General Assembly for the community. So we invite all of the people to attend, and we introduce the local team, the point persons, the monitoring officer, and the collectors. So they can be familiar with whom they're going to interact, especially during the collection system. So I think at least for Tacloban City, that's the only barrier we're encountering.
All right, and the next question from David. For cities with small roads, so inaccessible roads with tricycle or small truck, how does Tacloban City manage their organic waste after collection? Do they use temporary collection points before transporting to the composting facility?
Okay, good question. We have two systems. We have two systems when we collect organic waste among the households. First is we still do the house-to-house collection if there's really narrow roads. What the collectors do is they leave their collection vehicle in the main road and then go inside the alley with a small uh, smaller buckets, and then that's where they transfer their organic waste. Second, we have this drop-off system where the households or the communities drop their biodegradable waste on a scheduled time. Because if it's not scheduled, uh, we're pretty sure that it will be a mixed waste. And the location of the container should be strategic enough that the animals, specifically the dogs or cats, won't reach those containers. So drop-off collection system and house-to-house collection system, but there are also some external collectors because in the Philippines, especially in rural areas, we have this third player. We call them hog racers. So basically, they collect food waste from the households, and they provide separate containers, and they use it as their feedstock for their animals or their pigs.
All right, thank you. And oh no, there's one more. Reggie says, what are the challenges in implementing zero waste programs in the city of Tacloban, especially if there are political differences by the leaders of LGUs, and how to sustain the sustainability of the program in both LGUs and in the barangays?
So we there will always be political differences, but the good thing about the zero waste program is that it clarifies to the local leaders, to the people, that this is this is for the common good of the community. So there's no political agenda behind this program. And the good thing about the zero waste program of Modern Foundation is that it empowers the different sectors to participate in the zero waste program. And this is crucial in sustaining the implementation of the program, because usually the local officials, especially if their term is ending, what happens is that the next official will just throw out that existing program because he or she is not in the same political party. But the good thing about the Solid Waste Management Board or committee is that majority of the sectors are still present, and at the same time, they have equal votes with the city mayor and with some officials who are also a member of that solid waste management board. So this helps sustain the program and also maintain the balance between being subjective to the program at the same time, what do you call this, uh, putting some bad ideas or putting some bad political agendas for the zero waste program. So City Solid Waste Management Board or committee is one of the keys, and as well as regular consultations and meetings.
Okay, great. And I'm just going to ask one last question to the both of our panelists. What's one thing that you wish you had known when you were starting off on this journey of moving your cities towards zero waste that you would like to share with our participants today?
Well, one thing comes to mind. There was amazingly good results in a few cities, especially in Italy, with zero waste programs for families. So for a much lower unit, basically, where they managed to achieve residual amounts of like 5 kilograms per person per year, which is absurd. So if we knew that earlier, we'd focus on that much sooner too, because it has unbelievably amazing results, really.
Okay, very interesting. And Rafa?
I think us, it's more of uh, having the will as leaders, be onboarded, because there are meetings where they were, especially the initial meetings and planning, where they are not present or they prioritize other programs. But eventually, as the programs uh, is progressing, they eventually realize the importance of zero waste program, and suddenly most of them jump on and part of the and became part and they became part of the implementation. And I think it's also crucial that before starting a program, you really need to have a good timing for the implementation. You need to consider the cultural activities, the elections, the holidays, etc., etc. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, well, that concludes our webinar. Thank you everyone for participating. And again, thank you to Rafa and Jaka for being our fantastic panelists. This webinar is recorded, so you will be able to access it afterwards through our website, no-burn.org. And yeah, you can follow our social media platforms, Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives on Facebook, and GAIA No Burn on Twitter for updates on when the next webinars will be. And of course, you'll also hear about them through our listservs. So, all right, goodbye, everyone.